All right, hopefully everyone can hear and indeed see me. My name is Brendan Hellman. I'm a Vice President with the International Road Federation. And on behalf of the IRF and the African Development Bank, I wanted to extend a warm welcome to a new program, Safe and Efficient Urban Mobility for Africa, which we are initiating today in partnership with the African Development Bank. We'll be spending just over an hour together. We will walk you through the foundation and the main objectives of this program. Indeed, one of the main objectives is to establish city-specific action plans, and we'll be turning to Tanzania for an example of how that might happen. We will be introducing you to the two tracks identified in the program, and we're very glad to welcome our track champions, who will be saying a few words about their work and their contribution to the program. And of course, we will be taking questions and answers. Donc un petit mot de bienvenue également en français donc pour nos collègues francophones qui nous écoutent. Donc cette présentation sera livrée surtout en anglais. Nous tenterons de faire des synthèses en français à la fin de chaque intervention. D'autre part, nous prendrons les questions en anglais et en français, donc indifféremment, donc n'hésitez surtout pas. Et enfin, une synthèse écrite sera préparée en français à l'issue de ce webinaire. A few brief words of introduction about the IRF. We are in fact turning 75 this year, and again with the same mission and objectives as when we were founded in 1948, and that is to serve as a global clearinghouse for best practices, applied knowledge and technology solutions, which we apply at a global level and across all aspects of road policy making, planning and design and operations. IRF is present globally, perhaps less so on the African continent than in other areas, and hopefully in the course of this project and indeed some of the other activities that we have upcoming in 2023, this is a shortfall that can be addressed. For a long time, the founding years and decades of the IRF, our focus really was on pushing towards more connectivity linkages, and more roads seem to be the answer to just about any problem that may have existed. As an organization, I would like to think that our thinking has pivoted somewhat, and we do recognize the negative byproducts of road traffic, such as safety, emissions, pollution, and the importance of planning transport programs on a holistic basis. I'd like to take this opportunity now to kind of turn over to our partners and indeed sponsors for the program, the African Development Bank. Mr. Nijilabi is on the call, and I'd ask him to unmute himself and perhaps walk us through the AFDB's main priorities in the urban sector. And I will take this opportunity. I believe you have shared a document with us, and I will take this opportunity to open this as well. Niji, very warm welcome to the call, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the bank's work in the field of city urban planning and city traffic. Niji, you're currently muted. Let me see if I can.
Yes,
unmute you. No, it has to be yes.
Yes, Brendan, thank you very much. Welcome to everyone here and to this webinar, first one to probably not the first training session, but I think it's a session, pilot session to understand and to submit the program and of this training. I thank IRF and all the team here present to be in this meeting, and can probably present this program exactly. This is program with COAFEC, the Korean African Cooperation, and first part of this was to invite stakeholders from different cities in Africa This is called the City Leaders Program, and it's designed for helping and assisting different cities in Africa, probably all cities, but it's a huge number, but different cities benefit from this program in the beginning of 2019, I think. But the problem of the COVID in 2020-21, and we stopped everything, and now we are in the second session with safe and efficient urban mobility, let's say, training for this kind of responsible in different cities. We want to help them and to assist them to understand what is done in different developed countries about this traffic impact studies and different urban mobility planning. Urban planning also, we see that in different actions with the bank since 2019, I think we have a new division which called the Urban and the Urban Development Division. We have the new fund which is to help different cities, technical assistance, supporting municipalities to come over the different problems and to deliver services, municipal service and city service in a good way. Probably you know better than me the situation of the different cities. Few cities are well managed and they understand and they know what they have to do for different services. They have the capacities both in human resources and financial, but majority of the cities, they have a lack of this capacities, expertise in different services, urban planning, services in waste management, in everything urban mobility they probably don't know about at all, and they don't have the power on this sector, subsector, let's say urban mobility. Some majority of cities are under the Ministry of Urban Development or Ministry of the Interior, and they don't have the power on the licensing or the road maintenance or anything, and they don't have the finance for this. So the Urban Mobility Fund, UMDF, was created to support this different cities in different ways. We are now about the big problem of the city action plans and diagnostics. And we did 5 cities in 2020, 2021, which was Bizerte in Tunisia, Libreville in Gabon, Antananarivo, Conakry, and Dodoma, I think. Let's go through the presentation. This city diagnostic and action plan is a program, I think, who has the same thing like the South American region. Our Nordic fund, who is funding this fund, SECO from Sweden, Switzerland, Spanish, and the second, let's say we are in the second pattern of this fund, and we have now a good budget for the different action of this fund, and we are going to probably establish more city action plans in different cities. We are launching now, right now, the second pilot studies with 6 or 7 cities. The DDP, the RFP will be launched this end of month, and there is 6 or 7 cities: Bangui, Marrakesh, probably in the presentation we have all these cities, and the fund is destined for funding, technical assistance, training, the needs of studies, etc., for different cities. It's not for projects, but the city diagnostic and the action plans is the main objective is to have probably more than 5 priorities in projects and to be funded later by different funds in the African Development Bank. It depends on the state of the country there. The problem is that we don't have the sub-sovereign funding yet in Africa because the city, they don't have the capabilities and the capacities to borrow from the bank. But probably with the government, they can get priority projects, and we can go to help also to make this projects preparation, feasibility study, the design. If we are in good big infrastructure, waste management, sewage, roads, BRTs, different projects, we can through this UMDF fund make some money to prepare this project. So different cities, they have to contact the bank, the MDF team secretariat. In this presentation, I think we have the different emails and contacts. After this session, I think we can give them this the presentation. They will find all the different contacts. Thank you very much.
Merci Neji. Donc rapidement en français, on l'aura compris, les villes africaines, elles ne sont pas uniques de ce point de vue-là, souffrent d'un triple déficit, à la fois au niveau de leur capacité technique, de leur scope de responsabilité, d'un déficit financier également. Et le fonds de développement municipal que vous avez présenté vise à fournir effectivement une solution à court terme sur certains de ces points, mais également à aider ces villes à préparer avec plus de succès des programmes à long terme nécessitant effectivement des financements plus importants. I'll continue with the next stage of the presentation to discuss now the program that we have elaborated with the African Development Bank, and then we'll hand over to our guest speakers. So please bear with me as I reopen my presentation, hopefully on the right slide. So we've heard this, of course, in Neji's presentation, but we all know that the urban population in Africa is growing at an unprecedented pace, and it is that these cities are one of the critical factors now that will pave the way to structural transformation for African societies. We also heard about the challenges that come with providing adequate services in the context of this rapid urbanization, but that, you know, this isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion in the sense that tools exist today in particular to kind of manage this process, manage this urban mobility, and durably transform Africa's mobility landscape. Will Africa's cities look like this in the future? Who knows? It's an interesting representation and perhaps something that we can collectively aspire to. A few words about the program itself, Safe and Sustainable Urban Mobility for Africa. So in line with what was presented and with the overall objectives of the Municipal Development Fund managed by the African Development Bank, the idea is to provide capacity building and mentorship services, but with the objective of assisting participating cities in putting together implementation-ready action plans. We will be covering 4 practice areas: traffic engineering, congestion environmental management, designing cities for public and non-motorized transport, the forgotten class of vulnerable road users, and establishing and evaluating municipal road safety strategies. We hear a lot about Vision Zero. What does this mean at the urban level? In practice, we are starting today. Again, thank you for joining us with this orientation webinar. 2 tracks have been identified for this program, and you can see that we will have a number of e-learning webinars which we will be convening you to, hopefully in an interactive format. So follow the safety track and also the traffic optimization, should we say, track. So these webinars will take place in February and March, leading to what we hope are the formulation of action plans by the participating cities. And we will be convening you to present these action plans in the context of workshops that we will be organizing in Accra, Ghana, on the 25th April, so just 3 months from now. Why Accra? Because we will be hosting the 3rd IRF Africa Regional Congress. The theme is Delivering Tools for Connectivity. It will be held at the International Conference Centre in Ghana in partnership with a number of national and regional stakeholders. And of course, program participants will be able to access the event at no cost, and there will be these instructor-led workshops which will build on these various webinars that will be organized over the next couple of months. So without further ado, we have already touched upon the topic of action plans and the need to help these cities formulate both short-term action plans, but long-term aspirational strategies, and how these kind of relate with one another. And with this, I'm very pleased to invite our first guest speaker, so Simon Kalolo, who is with Amend, an NGO he'll be briefly introducing. And Amend has actually helped a city, Tanga, in Tanzania, develop a safe and sustainable action plan. And Simon will be walking us through that process and hopefully providing inspiration to the participating cities. So Simon, I'll ask you to go ahead and unmute yourself, perhaps. If you want to turn on your webcam, you're more than welcome to do so. And in the meanwhile, I will go ahead and open your presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brendan. And hello, everyone. Again, my name is Simon Kalolo. I'm a Tanzania country manager based in Tanzania for an international organization, a road safety organization called Amend. So Amend started its work in Tanzania back in 2009, but we have an office in Maputo, Mozambique, as well as Accra, Ghana, where we've been working for the last 15 years. And today, as been introduced, I'm going to share with you what we did in Tanga, Tanzania. This is a secondary city. If you can please share the presentation. Brendan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was already being shared. This is I'm revealing my challenges with Teams. There, you should have it now.
Fantastic. All right. So yes. So Tanga. For those who are familiar with Tanzania, Dar es Salaam and Dodoma, and Dar es Salaam is our capital city, and Dodoma is our capital city. Dar es Salaam is our commercial city with more than 5 million people. But Tanga is a small city up the coast, about 200,000 people. It's mostly a city bicycle, meaning that a lot of people in Tanga use bicycles. And as well, for the last few years, we have been seeing motorcycles being a dominant mode of transport because of its convenience and other factors. But from the road safety point of view, the high numbers of pedestrians and children, of course, and young people who are involved in road traffic injuries has been increasing in Tanga every year. So to go back to our program, over the past 3 years and more, we have worked to improve road safety in this city in Tanga. And last year, after complete 3 years of working on the ground, we developed an action plan for safe and sustainable transport. I understand that a copy of this action plan will be shared with you participants later. So I'm going to talk briefly about how we went through each step to design this particular action plan. Again, thank you, Brendan and IRF for this opportunity, but also I want to recognize the funder of this program in Tanga, Foundation Botna, who funded the work over the last 3 years. So as you can see, this is a typical situation, typical nature dynamics in Tanga, pedestrians, lack of pedestrian crossings, lack of pedestrian space, and of course, the mixture of motorcycles and three-wheelers and bicycles as well, dominating the space, road space in Tanga. Next slide, please. So we know that in Tanga, on average, only 15% of motorcycle riders have driving license. Majority, 85% of riders and motorcycle owners in Tanga do not possess valid driving license, which says a lot from the road safety point of view. And of course, only 14% of riders have undertaken any sort of training that helps them, equips them with enough knowledge to use motorcycles, ride motorcycles on the road. And Tanga, as many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, majority of children walk to and from school. And this, we have seen it in many other countries where Amend has worked over the last years. And next slide, please. Now, to demonstrate how we developed this action plan, we, when we started our work in Tanga and realized the scale of the task ahead of us to improve road safety in that small city, we decided to open an office and recruit local staff who will coordinate and manage the day-to-day activities in Tanga, which is also good because local staff understand the local dynamics, but also to support the overall implementation of the project. From the start, we had very strong focus on stakeholder engagements as part of this project in Tanga, with series of workshops and meetings, simply to understand the issues from the point of views, much as we had our technical expertise on the ground, but we involved them a lot from the very beginning to the very end, where we ended up with the action plan that I'll explain a little bit later. And we combined this with a number of real project demonstration projects, which we did in Tanga. For example, pedestrian infrastructure improvement around schools, motorcycle training, road safety education around schools, public awareness, and community awareness and engagement as well. And we undertook a lot of research to a detailed understanding of the issues in Tanga, as I'll share in the next slide, please. And as I said, stakeholder engagement took a lot of our time and energy, but it was completely worth it. But it is that is what enabled us to make such a positive progress to bring people on side in the development of this action plan. We have a very strong relationship with the city mayor, there, the district commissioner, local community development officers, local politicians, regional traffic police commander, and school station leaders, members of the media who are critical in conveying the message to the mass. And all these key stakeholders were involved from the beginning, as I said, through these stakeholder engagements and meetings. Next slide, please. Speaking about the implementation of pedestrian infrastructure improvement around schools, this is typically one of the projects that we have been implementing in Tanga. We identify high-risk schools together with the local officials at the municipal level, at the city level, which schools are at high risk, and we go there and put in place very basic low-cost infrastructure interventions like walkways separating pedestrians from the from the carriageway, and then at the end of these improvements around schools, we normally have a ribbon cutting event just to give credits to the government, to the community, to the school and children at that particular school, and also bring the media to as part of the attention to the rest of the stakeholders and the community. And that was one of the ribbon cutting exercise in Tanga. Next slide, please. Also, on top of the infrastructure improvement around schools, we have trained over 500 riders in Tanga over the last 3 years. And as you can see on the left, that's one of the training sessions going on. And on the right, that's a traffic commander handing over his certificate to one of the participants of the training, just to recognize their presence and their participation in this tailored motorcycle training in the city. Next slide, please. We have also done a peer-reviewed study in Tanga, looking at the travel surveys, knowledge retention surveys, key informant interviews in Tanga, and this has been published in an international journal, which also cements the fact that the work that we have been doing in Tanga has evidence and data to show the impact and the progress that we saw over the last 3 years. Next slide, please. Now, having started our work in Tanga back in 2019, 3 years ago, we were in a position now to start developing an action plan in early 2022. So it's about 2 years down the line after starting the real on-the-ground demonstration projects, where it was by this thought that we had a full collaboration with all the mentioned stakeholders. We listened to them about what they wanted and how they wanted to prepare and contribute and be part of this discussion to come up with the action plan, knowing the importance as a long-term plan, plus the current plan of what I meant as an road safety organization, but fundamentally the city government in Tanga and also other key stakeholders, how they will collectively work together on the road safety agenda and move forward. So after listening to the contributions and comments and input in this against the international best practice, making sure that all the elements of the safe system approach were incorporated. For example, safe road users, roads infrastructure, safe speeds, safer vehicles. And we included a number of actions, as you will see, things for which we knew that we had the funding from our friends at Foundation Botna, and we allocated enough budget for that, these activities, these actions, and immediately we thought of the progress they could make. And then we had the aspirations as part of the action plan, things that we recognize will, along the line, need some further discussion and advocacy before the implementation. And we put in place systems for regular reviewing of the action plan. We go back, we do some meetings with them, and then review what needs to be improved as part of the aspirations and the actions. That's, I know, Brendan, you wanted me to speak a little bit about the action plan itself. This is exactly how the action plan looks like. Straight going to the action. If you can go back a few slides, Brendan, please. See a timeline, if I can use that timeline. Go back.
Simon, I'll just do a very quick summary for our French-speaking colleagues who've joined the course. Thank you very much for that, and we'll talk about the action plan in just a moment. Donc rapidement, effectivement, face à un constat partagé d'un niveau inacceptable de risque, en particulier pour les deux roues, les écoliers, comme on voit sur l'image. Donc Amend a su travailler de façon efficace avec les différentes parties prenantes et donc entamer une logique de dialogue, mais également une logique de formation, on l'a vu avec les motocyclistes, et de recherche pour mieux appréhender les problématiques liées à la circulation et à la sécurité routière, celles-ci ayant été synthétisées dans ce plan d'action que Simon est en train de nous présenter. I apologize for the interruption, Simon, please continue.
Fantastic. If you can go to page 7, please, Brandon. Page 7. Fantastic. Okay. Yes, on the right, you see the timeline. If you can zoom in, please.
I'll try to.
Okay, next page. Next page. Oh, fantastic. I think that's enough. Okay, that's okay. Oh, next page. The timeline. Sorry. All right, there it is.
We're still on the timeline.
Exactly. So basically, this has been the timeline from where we started in Tanga to the point where we came up with the action plan that we are seeing in front of our computers now. And yes, so as I said, 2009, where we started the real activities, we have a set of activities that we implemented. And in 2022, we had these actions together. Basically, what we're saying is these, for example, we have a media campaign. These are set of activities that we have been doing for the last 3 years, and we have funding for. So we know that we have the support on the ground, we have the political will, we have the stakeholder full engagement and support to conduct these media campaigns, to engage the local politicians, to engage community development officers, to speak about road safety, to advocate for infrastructure around schools, to improve infrastructure around schools. These are the actions that we are doing now and we have been doing for the last 3 years. And that's very important for me to distinguish between these actions and the aspirations. And now for the aspirations, right, you can scroll down, please, page 15. Right, so all these are actions, as I said, infrastructure around schools. And then for the aspirations, just to wrap this up, for aspirations, as I explained, these came up through discussions between us and the stakeholders, including the city mayor and his team, and will fundamentally contribute to the long-term impact of this action plan. We have set about 12 to 16 months of action plan review, where we'll have specific meetings with all stakeholders who are involved in the design and the preparation of this action plan, to review the aspirations. If there are new aspirations from our stakeholders along the line that need to be incorporated as part of this action plan, or if there are some action aspirations that are already in the action plan, but we feel all of us, all the need to revise or to take that off the action plan, these updates will be happening in an interval of 12 to 16 months. And we believe that through very participatory approach, we'll be able to now have a very sustainable action plan. And we are looking to have this up to the end of 2030, the second decade of action. And from there, we will continue working with the stakeholders in Tanga, and hopefully we'll get more support from even other funders and partners to carry on fantastic work that the city of Tanga and people of Tanga have worked together to come with this action plan. Thank you so much, and I'm happy for further questions.
Thank you very much for that, Simon. I think that provides a brilliant template for a lot of cities to be inspired by and work with. It'd be interesting to check in with you on a regular basis to see how those actions and indeed those aspirations are being met over time. But thank you very much for that. And if possible, we'd welcome if you can stick around for the questions and answers. As promised, we are now, I hope my screen is being shared, in fact. We'll now introduce our first track, Designing Safe Cities for Public and Non-Motorized Transport, and what does the idea of Vision Zero mean for these African cities? And for this, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Jean-François Giselle to the call. Jean-François is one of the lead trainers at the IRF on safe systems, safe road engineering, safe street planning. But of course, he has 35 years of professional experience developed in over 30 countries, including some in Africa, continents he's very familiar with. So without further ado, Jean-François, I would ask you to unmute yourself, and I believe you have a presentation which you are going to share with us.
Yes, thank you, Brendan. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be with you today. Brendan, do you want me to share my own screen or with my own presentation?
Yes, if you could. If not, sure. I think I have a copy of it somewhere.
Hold on. I don't have access to it. You need to give me access. I don't think I can share if you don't allow me to, Brendan.
Let me go ahead and then share my screen. Please bear with me.
That might be easier.
As I open your presentation. Yes, of course.
So while Brendan is preparing this, Yeah, let me tell you, I'm Canadian. I'm living in Montreal, Quebec. I do a lot of international work. At the current time, I'm talking to you from France because I'm traveling for business. I should be back at home by by the end of next week, I guess, or the following one. I do have a quick presentation that I hope you can see. I can see it. So thank you, Brendan, for sharing. And we'll quickly talk about the safety track of the program. So on the next slide, please. Yep, go ahead. Next one. So as Brendan explained, there are two tracks. One of them is on traffic engineering, which is you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. And no, go back, Brendan, you're going too fast. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. So the track that I'm going to be leading is the road safety one, and as we said, it's composed of two webinars and a workshop. So the two webinars and once again, the dates are going to be confirmed. It's a tentative. The first one will be tentatively on February 8th, but it might be the day before or after. Brendan will send you the information. And the first one will be we'll be talking about engineering and planning, and I'll show you detail of that in a couple of seconds. The second webinar will be focusing on the municipal road safety strategies. And at the workshop, we'll hopefully review together some very specific case studies from participants. So real case studies from cities in Africa where we can see problems, issues, and solutions that can be brought forward. That's going to be in Accra in Ghana. Next slide, Brendan, please. So as we said, the rationale behind all of this, those webinars and those workshops, it's to face the challenge of fast urbanization, which is developing all over the world. And actually, Africa, it's a lot of people are going to big city for job, for economic reasons, and cities are growing very, very fast. So there is a need for safe and efficient mobility. And we do have a lot of systems that are being developed, traffic management systems. And the idea is to see how we can apply those systems to low-income countries, because some of them and some of that data can be very useful in planning better roads and better systems. Another approach that we try to do through this program is share some best practices from around the world. In my second webinar in March, I'm going to be showing you example coming from Canada, coming from Europe, coming from Asia, of systems that have been put in place, so that could be very helpful. And actually, all of this is an interesting opportunity to alter the status quo and try really to transform the urban landscape, the urban mobility landscape in Africa. So we are going to do it through two webinars. The first one is safe and efficient urban mobility. We'll be talking about vulnerable users and traffic calming and this kind of stuff. And then the other one will be Vision Zero. How do we implement that? And we'll try to do it at the workshop. Next, please. So the objective of that safety track is have a specific look about vulnerable road users. Here we are talking pedestrian, cyclists, transit users, and we look at that from a planning and engineering perspective. We'll try to review the best practices and try to see what do we need to do to make VRUs safer in their travel. We need to analyze what could be applicable for the reality of African city, because it's very specific. They've got very specific context with extremely high level of people walking and cycling, much more than in other cities. In Asia, for example, they got two wheels all over the place. So each city, each country has its challenges, and so we look at what they do and how they handle it, and what can be brought back to Africa and to improve things out there. Next slide, please. So first webinar, as I said, it's going to be on February 8th, most likely. Next one, and next slide, please, Brendan. It's we'll be talking about, we'll try to look at the threats of life that are facing a wide number of road users in Africa. We'll try to see what are the needs for VRUs. How do they travel? What is a risk for them? What can we do to make them safer? We'll look at the idea of traffic separation. We do that quite a bit. We try to separate, pedestrian and we try to have bicycle path, and As in many cities, we've got specific corridors for transit, so they can go over congestion area. It's easier to handle and to operate. So we look at different solutions, and we'll look at traffic calming solutions that are being implemented all over the world with quite a bit of success actually. But it's more difficult than it seems to make them right properly. And actually, I'll share that at the next webinar. But we had very recently we had a study that was published by the Ministry of Transport of Quebec, showing that many of the traffic calming devices that they did implement were not working very well. It's not because they're not working well, it's because they are using them by themselves. And as a standalone solution, it does not work well. But when you work it in complement with other stuff, urban planning and different type of signing and different type of environment, that's working quite efficiently. So we'll be looking at that. Next slide, please. So the content of the first webinar in February, we'll look at the African context, so to make sure we understand, what's specific about the urban mobility in Africa. We'll look at vulnerable users. I've got some facts to share with you. We'll look at speed management. How do we manage speed? How do we make it work properly? We'll look at some traffic calming concepts and some possible application of all of that in the African context. I will provide you with some very useful references on road safety, on human factors, and on African guidelines for safety, which are quite interesting to look at. And most of them are available on the web, so you can have access to them. And we'll have a discussion and Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. The second webinar is going to be in March. Next slide. What we'll do in that second webinar is we'll look at the Vision Zero concept and the safe system approach. Most people have an idea of what that is, but we'll look in detail, how do we implement that? What are the political requirements that are necessary to be able to implement Vision Zero? What are the elements of success? What are the KPIs? How do we implement all of that in Africa with the specificities of African cities? We'll look at example from other cities. In particular, I'm thinking about Montreal, because that's easy for me. That's where I live. But we'll look at Amsterdam. They did a lot of things for to improve safety and reduce speed out there. Most likely, we'll have example from Korea as well. We'll try to work on case studies with participating cities. So we'll try to make this interactive and make sure that participants to the webinar can talk about their own cities and bring some example of their own stuff that we will share eventually at the workshop in Ghana. Next slide, please. Sorry. So the content of the second webinar. Yep, go ahead, Brendan. Nope, you're going too fast. Go back. Yep. So as I said, Vision Zero, safe system approach, political requirements, measuring success. Example from Netherlands, Canada, and Korea. And homework. We'll ask people to do some kind of homework and how to do it and how to prepare your case study so we can work on it later in April in Ghana. Yes, next slide, please, Brendan. Yep, go ahead. That's going to be a workshop. I'll show you what the workshop is about. So the workshop will go over once again the general concept that were presented in Seminar 1 and 2. We'll review some element of the Vision Zero strategy, and then we'll ask participating African city to show their case study. So they will present the issues that they have and the solution they come up with or they want to implement, and we'll analyze that and prepare together some action plan for each of the case studies. One of the points which is interesting will be to look at different obstacles that we can see. For example, someone is going to say, okay, we are going to do some kind of speed management system, and we look at what are the possible hurdles that they're going to be encountering and how we can mitigate those problems. Next slide, please. So I'll just say a few words. I've got a couple of slides on African context. As you can see, currently I said 2025 on this slide, but most of the world's biggest cities are in Asia, and they're going to be in Asia for a while. But next slide will show you that by 2100, by the next century, most of the biggest city will be concentrated in Africa. When you look at the rate of growth, and this is a quite interesting issue that African cities are going to be facing. Next slide, please, Brendan. So road safety in low-income country, it's interesting to see that the deaths are really not acceptable in low-income countries. It's way too high. It's a leading killer of children and young adults, and more than 50% of the victims are amongst vulnerable users. So progress is being made, but it's not uniform throughout the world. High-income countries have been reducing their death rates, but in low-income countries, there were no reductions in 2013, which is dramatic. Currently, the death rate are higher by 3 times in comparison with high-income countries. And even though in low-income countries, only 1% of the world's vehicles are there are still 13% of road fatalities, which doesn't make sense at all. When you look at those numbers, it's really scandalous. I mean, we need to do something about this because it's absolutely not correct that low-income countries are suffering that much. Brendan, next slide, please. Brendan, I lost you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's working. Thank you. Another look at Africa. You look at the different countries here on the slide. So you see the America, you see Europe, and you can see that Africa is way over everybody else. Okay. What's interesting to see is that within Africa, there is a difference between middle income and low income countries. The middle income countries have around 23.3 deaths per 100,000 population, and low income it's 29.3, so it's higher. And the higher income the country, the lower the number. So they put in place solutions. Obviously, they've got the funds for doing it. That makes a huge difference. But it's not only that. There are a lot of very low-cost solutions that could be implemented readily, and that's what we want to focus on. Brendan, keep going, please. Yep, thank you. So specifically looking at vulnerable users, as we said, over 50% of the road deaths are among VRUs, and Africa has the highest proportion in the world, which is quite sad actually. When you look at the globally, there are about a quarter of all deaths that are related to pedestrian and cyclists. In Africa, it's close to 1/2, which is really bad. And what's worse is that despite this predominance of road deaths, the vulnerable user are still way ignored in the planning, design, and operation of roads. We still make more room for motorized vehicle and cars, much more than anything else. Whereas we should have a human-centered vision and focus, especially for African city, because that's where the majority of the people are. They walk, they cycle much more than they drive. So we need to look into that. Next slide, please. So I'm coming to the end of my presentation here. As we said at the beginning, this is a very nice opportunity to alter status quo. But how do we do it? Okay, so we want to make the best use of the existing road networks. We don't want to build new roads. We just want to make them better and safer by managing and controlling traffic activities. And we'll look at that, how we do it. We need to provide practical, safe, efficient, and comfortable mobility solutions to VRUs. Also, what we want to do is maintain and even increase the modal share for NMT, non-motorized transport users, because we want to make the transit user experience easier and safer. So, that's something we've got to look at. And not the least, but we want to improve efficiency and safety of all transportation modes. Okay, we want to look at cars also. How can we make motorized vehicles safer? And how can we minimize the environmental the impact on the environment, the environmental footprint? Next slide, please. Brendan, I think it's my last one. Yes. And how do we do it? Well, we've got 2 ways of looking at it, and we'll look at both. The first one on the left-hand side, we've got some top-down principle to look at. So we got to enable
stronger institutional foundations, establish a function of road hierarchy, which is quite important and quite useful. We want to avoid inappropriate land use. We want to favor multimodal transport and improve space use. On the other hand, when we start from the bottom, what we want to do is develop a human-centric approach to road safety. We want to shift the focus away from motorized vehicle and start looking at vulnerable users. We want to improve safety if we can through ITS technologies. There are a lot of technology we could apply and deploy that would help vulnerable users and all road users. And finally, we want to deploy the 3 E's measures. As well, you all know, 3 E's is engineering, education, and enforcement. We want to push on this, which is the way to do it. It's a more holistic view of our approach. And I think that was my last slide. I think there is a last one, Brendan, which just say thank you or something like that. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was looking forward to seeing you all at very shortly, actually, at the first webinar, and ready to answer any question whenever you want, Brendan. So back to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-François. Jean-François, vous êtes francophone, donc je ne ferai pas l'injure de condenser votre propos. Peut-être, là encore, pour nos participants francophones, juste en 1 minute, de rappeler les objectifs clés, en particulier par rapport à cette attention que vous souhaitez porter aux usagers vulnérables de la route.
Oui, bien sûr, bien sûr. Comme vous avez pu voir sur les différentes diapos qu'on a présentées, donc le focus du track 2, de la deuxième voie des webinaires, ça va être sur la sécurité, et l'emphase est mise sur les usagers vulnérables. Donc, ce qu'on veut, c'est vraiment essayer de réduire le nombre de décès qui sont absolument surreprésentés en Afrique. Au niveau des usagers vulnérables. Et quand on parle d'usagers vulnérables, on parle de piétons, on parle de cyclistes et on parle d'utilisateurs de transport en commun. Alors, l'idée, c'est de regarder d'un point de vue d'ingénierie, d'un point de vue de design, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire. On voudrait appliquer des solutions comme du contrôle de la vitesse et comment ça se fait, et ce qu'on appelle du traffic calming, c'est-à-dire un moyen de réduire la vitesse à l'aide d'ingénierie. Donc, on peut rétrécir les voies, on peut faire des chicanes, on peut créer des dodanes. Il y a différentes manières de le faire, mais il y a une manière de le faire plus intelligente que d'autres. Et puis, pour que ça marche, il faut que ces choses-là soient faites de manière coordonnée avec d'autres activités. Lors du deuxième webinaire qui va avoir lieu au mois de mars, on va regarder toute l'approche de vision zéro, puis des routes sûres, donc, et des systèmes sûrs. Les systèmes sûrs, ça veut dire des véhicules sûrs, des usagers sûrs, etc. Donc, on va passer à travers ça et on va regarder des exemples de différentes villes. Et on va demander aux villes participantes de préparer des études de cas de leur propre ville avec les enjeux qu'on va regarder après au congrès d'Accra au mois d'avril. On va passer en revue, vous allez présenter vos propres villes et on va regarder ensemble des solutions pour améliorer la sécurité et on espère arriver à réduire ces taux de décès qui sont absolument effarants dans les villes africaines. J'espère que j'ai bien résumé. Brendan, je te repasse la parole.
C'est un résumé excellent. Thank you so much for that. And it's of course it's a joy when we work with bilingual instructors such as Jean-François. Without further ado, our next and final guest speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Adam Lynch. I believe he joins us from the United States. He is a senior traffic engineering specialist with the PCV, one of the well, I guess the solutions provider of reference for traffic planning and forecasting. And Adam himself has 18 years experience in the industry of traffic modeling, studies and design. And we started hearing about the central role those played in ensuring more sustainable pathways for African cities. So Adam, I'd perhaps ask you to unmute yourself. You sent me a presentation which looks like it's a very complete presentation, but we can show portions of it if you wish. So I will just await your guidance in terms of how you prefer to do this. Adam, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think we can, well, thank you actually for inviting me to this, but I think we can start with slide 3 and then we can move on to probably about slide 14 and then skip a couple slides here and there to round out the presentation for today. But again, yeah, thank you for the invitation here. I'm actually in Germany. I'm the American in our HQ office in Germany. So to it's actually very interesting to talk to many of traffic engineers and planners across the world, and this adds on to the experience that I've had for traffic impact assessments that I've done in the United States and Canada, pretty much all over the United States. But now being in charge of products and things like this with PTV Group, I get to interview quite a few professionals all across the world, and it's a very valuable experience, and definitely an experience I think will benefit this class. So my workshop is more of a kind of an educational training, I would say. It's very based on, I'll show you in a few slides, but it's very based on the traffic impact assessment guidelines that were developed by the African Development Bank. And the workshop schedule for me would be the class 1 would be more or less the preparation of a TIA and the introductions, just learning what it's used for, and going all the way up to how to start with existing conditions analysis. And then webinar 2 that will continue from there. So it's going from existing conditions, but then you're building on top of that with your development and looking at the hazards that additional traffic could generate to the location. And we'll go all the way through the reporting process and how to come up, write a TIA, what types of figures and certain things like this. And then we'll give a homework exercise as well, and that will lead up to this class 4 that I have on this agenda. This is hopefully what we'll be doing in Ghana, where we can use software to analyze TIAs, and I'll go through some of the software that I use and how to enter the data into that software and conduct these capacity analyses and things like that. All right, so next slide. And of course, we have our course partners, IRF, thanks for the invite again. And then part of, I'm using a lot of the manual that was created by the African Development Bank and the Africa Transport Policy Program. So next slide. Yeah, so the first workshop, not today, but the first workshop, we're gonna look at these learning objectives. And like I said, this is a lot of the background information for any stakeholders that might be joining this call who aren't completely familiar with what a TIA is and what the purpose of a TIA is. So we'll start somewhat slow, somewhat basic to build up that level of detail. And then we'll get into, like I said, a lot of the ways to get to the existing conditions. And this includes how to determine what your assumptions are for these studies and preparation of a data collection plan to make sure you have the right data to conduct your study. All right, next slide. The target groups, it's government agencies. So the reviewers at governments, like I said, the mayor or somebody like this could participate in this class. Engineers and planners and architects will all find something very useful in this class because they really do have to work very closely together for traffic impact assessments. For example, the architect, a lot of times they develop things that aesthetically look nice, and maybe they orientate buildings in certain ways. But when you're an engineer and you're looking at the circulation flow of a parking lot or of a facility, or how pedestrians may get to and from the building's orientations that the architect set up, that may not be the best. So it could be not so great for safety. It could not so great for drainage, who knows? But yeah, so this is where those 3 groups all have to work together in this class. So it's beneficial to really hear this message. Private developers, it's always great to be aware of the rules when you're starting a development and just know what the process is. I think that's very beneficial for them, and also make sure that they they are prepared to follow the guidelines and have the studies done, and their schedules are set up to be reasonable. So it's very valuable to them. And TIA consultants, a lot of times they're the ones doing most of the legwork on this. So of course, having the right understanding with the procedure and how things are reported and submitted to the agencies is very beneficial. All right, next. So the references here, I'm gonna send a link in the chat. This is the PDF that is basically the guideline to a traffic impact assessment from the African Development Bank and the Transportation Policy Program. This is a free PDF that you can download, and it's really great information. I do have to say, I was reading pretty much through everything, and it's all the information that I was using. So it's a nice consolidated resource. So the course that I put together is very closely based to this, and I'll be listing the chapter numbers from my slides to reference the places in the manual, so the participants can follow along. Okay, next here. Yeah, so that was the agenda, and for the next workshop, like if you want to back up one more, Brendan. So that would be the first workshop. The next workshop here, this is where we're starting with the trip generation. So this is taking a development and building it out, saying, you know, how many trips is this development creating? From that, we will take mode splits into account. So we'll understand who's walking there, who's taking the bus there, who's riding their bicycle, who's actually walking within the parking lots or something like this from one development to another. And then what routes they may actually take to this development through the assignment. So those will be very important topics within the next workshop that we will give, workshop number 2, which looked like that was March 2nd. And then we'll also look at some safety analyses at this as well, just very basic, like tips and things to look for to see if safety will be a concern for the conditions that you have. And then I'll go over again the review and approval process that's listed in the guidelines. All right, next slide. Yeah, keep going, one more. Yeah, so the definition of a traffic impact assessment, if you don't know this one, basically it's looking at the impacts to adjacent transportation networks. So if you have a development and it has its own driveways and circulatory roadways, what is the impact to the public street around it, more or less, right? And the reason why we look at this is we want to ensure safety and make sure that the development doesn't degrade safety on the public roadways as well as the internal roadways within a site. We want to make sure that the future growth in the area will actually accommodate the development traffic. And you know, just because it works on day one, we want to make sure it works in 10 years from then, because it's a lot of cost to upgrade the roadway just because something's not working. So planning ahead really goes a long way. And then there's the responsibility. So I mean, this responsibility is environmental responsibility, such as noise and pollution, as well as responsibility to safety and congestion and travel times and things like this. All right, next slide. Yep. So in the book itself, there was this really nice flow chart that kind of takes the traffic impact assessment and it looks at basically this cycle. So you have the impact, and then you develop a mitigation plan to that impact. Then you would execute the mitigation plan that corrects the impact, and then you have the proposed development in there. And this all just keeps going and going and going in a loop, because then the next proposed development may come in, and then you're looking at the next impacts, and you continuously look at this stuff. But again, the objectives are really to avoid things to mitigate. So when you're going through the traffic impact analysis, it's the planning part to make sure problems don't happen, and you don't have to mitigate problems in the future. So yeah. Next slide. Yeah, there we are. The benefits of the TIA. It's both private and public. We want to minimize the damage to pretty much all users, and make sure the users have safe access. And this really ties into the other workshop about safety and roadway safety, to make sure that the bicycles all connect up and pedestrians connect up in a safe manner. And integrating into the public network to make sure the delays are minimized, and also make sure we're integrating into the transit network correctly. We don't want to overload the transit in one place. We want to make sure transit is still functional and used responsible, and we can add transit, if that's a recommendation, to add different transit stops and different headways and capacities to the transit network. That's part of this as well. And I mentioned to the reduction of the reconstruction work. There's nothing more aggravating, I say, to the public than building something and not having it work, 2 or 3 years later, and you have to rip it out and redo it again. When you're using public funds, the public really does not like that so much. Next slide. And then we'll talk about where to apply the TIAs. There's several categories. We'll probably focus mainly on the left category for development projects. But yeah, that's commercial areas, offices, residential areas, if you're building any housing or things like this. Somewhat relative small projects. When you get into like very large build outs, such as sports complex that could impact regional traffic, then you're kind of going into another level of TIA that requires heavy duty planning software and things like that. We'll probably not specifically cover that in this workshop, and we'll stick to some of the smaller stuff. But then there's also these transportation projects. They also benefit from using traffic impact assessments. So when you're doing changes to bridges and roadways, maybe you're adding intersections, things like this, you can do these traffic impact assessments to make sure that development is working and also fitting into the system. And then there's the environmental projects. So you can use these traffic impact assessments to look at air pollution and noise pollution, because you have the traffic volumes and things like that to use as your base layer. All right, next
Anton,
slide.
thank you. Thank you very much. I propose we don't steal all the thunder from your first webinar, and because I'm also kind of conscious of time, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for some questions and answers from the audience, if that's okay with you, or if you have maybe some kind of wrap up conclusions before we take it to the next and final part of today's webinar.
No, I mean, I think that was getting towards the end anyway. If you maybe just want to go to slide 18. I was going to jump ahead just one slide.
Just say when.
It's the levels of TIA. Keep going. Yep, this back one. It's the one with, keep going back to the levels of TIA. It's No, backwards. Yep, that one right there. Stop right there. Yeah. So
there's a bit of a lag, but I'm on slide 18 now.
Yep. Yeah. So this would be the last good slide to stop with, but to make everyone aware of is that there are various levels of traffic impact analyses. So we'll also cover this, but this will be very important for this workshop to understand what's the influence of your analysis. Again, like I said, if you're doing something that causes a regional disturbance or something, you're looking at this level 3 analysis, and this requires a lot higher budget, a lot higher data collection plan, things like this. So it'd be very interesting for everyone involved to know how that's impacted. But if you're doing like something like level 1, where this is just a small shop or a tiny restaurant or something like this, you're really only looking at a few intersections. So there's scopes and scales to these traffic impact assessments that hopefully everyone will understand by the end of the workshop. So, yep. Okay, now I can stop.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Adam. Très brièvement en français, donc vous avez fait donné un excellent aperçu des analyses d'impact. Hein. C'est un outil qui doit être mis en œuvre préalablement à tout développement d'infrastructure afin de mieux quantifier l'impact sur la circulation, sur la sécurité routière et également, vous l'avez souligné, sur les émissions environnementales. Ça peut être également conçu comme un outil de travail partagé. Plusieurs catégories d'utilisateurs peuvent utiliser ces analyses d'impact, que ce soit des promoteurs commerciaux, des architectes, des consultants, les pouvoirs publics, évidemment. Et donc, c'est une façon finalement de se mettre d'accord sur ces projets et d'avoir une compréhension plus fine avec justement tous ces intervenants sur la totalité des impacts. Donc, je vous remercie vivement. And it does sound like those 2 webinars are going to be highly interesting as well. Let me I will stop sharing the screen and perhaps just reshare the initial presentation, and we will conclude with this and with any questions that may come from the audience. My apologies. Hopefully I'm on the right screen. Right, we've now come to the sequence with questions and answers. I believe we can either use the chat box or simply unmute ourselves if there are any particular questions. Et pour rappel, on acceptera très volontiers donc les questions en français, donc n'hésitez pas, vous pouvez effectivement allumer vos microphones ou lever votre main et je vous donnerai bien volontiers la parole. Neji Labi, please, you're very welcome to unmute your microphone, and thank you once again for the
Thank you very much to
leadership on
all
these
the presentation. Topics. Thank you, Brendan, and to our friends for the presentation. Very interesting presentation. Probably, Brendan, you forgot to present the people here in this session. I think it's very important that we know who is in this session and from which city or from which institution. It's very important to us to understand. I know that you will send us the list probably later, but it's good that everyone here to present himself. Thank you very much.
Excellent comments. Thank you, Neji, and my apologies for the submission. Perhaps folks can use the chat box to briefly introduce the city which they're joining us from, if that's okay with everyone. And again, so please take a moment just to kind of write the name of the African city you're representing or currently working in. And I think, as Neji highlighted, that will give us some very good insights into the geographic representation. Are there any additional questions at this point? I'm also keeping an eye on the chat box. Hopefully you are able to use it at this point. So please type.
If there is no question, I have a few additional questions for our colleagues, Jean-François and the PTV. I think, Jean-François, tu as parlé beaucoup de... D'abord, merci et bonjour. Je suis content de te retrouver ici avec nous.
Merci.
J'espère que tu vas bien.
Oui, oui, très bien.
Moi, j'ai insisté beaucoup sur les modes vulnérables. Je suis très d'accord avec toi. Il reste aussi que les villes africaines ici, hein, moi, ça fait longtemps que je voyage un peu partout. La problématique de l'infrastructure est énorme, hein. C'est la question de la signalisation horizontale, verticale, la séparation des mouvements et des voies, le marquage au sol qui est dérisoire, hein. C'est en une semaine les parties, aucune signalisation, aucune sécurisation des intersections. Les piétons, c'est vrai, c'est des modes vulnérables, ils sont touchés partout, hein, et c'est surtout le comportement des conducteurs. On a l'impression que quand ils voient des gens sur la route, là, ils foncent sur l'accélérateur. On n'arrive pas à comprendre ce genre de comportement parce que c'est à cause du manque de pénalisation, hein, qui est très dérisoire, hein. C'est 2000 francs, 3000 francs pour quelqu'un qui fonce sur les piétons. C'est absolument rien. Je sais qu'au Canada, aux États-Unis, c'est des amendes énormes, hein. Quand on t'attrape, c'est fini, hein. Tu ne referais plus la même erreur. Et donc, je crois qu'il faut insister sur ce truc dans la formation. Nos amis des villes, ils vont certainement ils vont soulever ces questions qui vivent tous les jours, hein. C'est incroyable. Donc, il y a la question de Tanga, là, la ville de Tanga. Moi, j'ai vu que les drainages, là, ça bouffe une partie de la route et ça obstrue tous les mouvements des piétons et des vélos, hein. C'est un trou dans la voie et ça donne quoi? Moi, je vis à Abidjan et je vois ça, c'est une catastrophe quand on veut passer de l'autre côté. D'abord, il n'y a pas de trottoir. Et quand il y a un trottoir, entre la voie et le trottoir, il y a ce fossé de drainage. Et les gens ne peuvent pas, il faut sauter pour passer de l'autre côté. C'est un peu ça aussi qu'il faut voir dans l'infrastructure, parce qu'il ne faut pas les couvrir avec des dalles un peu sécuritaires qui permettent aussi, quand on s'arrête sur les bords de la voie, on laisse quand même un mètre du côté de cette fosse, pour pas que la voiture tombe dans le drainage, hein. C'est un problème aussi. Voilà, merci beaucoup, hein.
Merci, Naru, pour les commentaires. Puis il y aurait beaucoup de choses à dire là-dessus. Puis je ne veux pas prendre trop de temps, mais c'est toutes des questions. Puis merci, tous les éléments que tu as amenés sont très, très pertinents et je vais les reprendre dans les différents webinaires pour en discuter. Moi, je crois beaucoup aux approches holistiques et aux approches complémentaires. C'est-à-dire que je crois qu'une chose faite toute seule n'a pas beaucoup d'effet. Les choses, quand elles se mettent à être ensemble, valent beaucoup plus que la somme des parties. Alors, ce que je vais proposer dans les cadres des différents séminaires, puis c'est d'avoir des solutions qui s'appuient les unes sur les autres. Alors, mettre un panneau de réduction de vitesse tout seul, ça ne fera jamais rien parce que d'abord, il va être détruit, il va se faire voler, les gens ne le respecteront pas. Mais si on le fait avec d'autres choses, je pense que ça peut commencer à porter fruit. Un élément sur lequel on va parler beaucoup, c'est de permettre que la route, que l'environnement parle plus que la signalisation. Alors, le marquage, c'est bien, la signalisation, c'est bien, mais quand on a une route nationale ou une route départementale ou une route principale qui traverse un village linéaire et que les gens roulent à 100 km/h de part et d'autre, et s'il n'y a rien qui change dans la route, les gens vont continuer à rouler vite, même si on met un petit panneau en disant de ralentir. Alors, c'est un peu ça dont je vais parler. Et pour répondre à ton dernier point par rapport au drainage, c'est un énorme problème. Et c'est pas seulement là, hein, je veux dire, on l'a vu, je l'ai vu dans beaucoup de pays africains et d'Amérique latine aussi, et des endroits notamment où ils ont des intempéries extrêmement violentes. Alors, en quelques heures, il y a des milliers de litres d'eau qui tombent et il faut pouvoir les drainer. C'est pour ça que tu as des grands canaux comme ça. Mais ils ont leur danger et on va aborder ce point parce qu'effectivement, c'est un très gros problème en plus que ça sert souvent de dépotoir parce que tout le monde fout ses poubelles dedans. Alors, c'est quelque chose qu'on va, c'est quelque chose qu'on va regarder de près. Merci pour tes commentaires, Nerby. Et Brendan, je te repasse la parole parce que je veux pas prendre toute la place.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-François. And just check in for additional questions. There's one very important, which we'll get to at the end, which is, of course, what's involved. How can cities participate in the program? I have to say this, one of the challenges that will, both for quality kind of action plans, safety action plans and traffic impact analysis is the availability of data going into this. And we saw in the case of Tango and Tanzania, the importance of the preliminary work that had been carried out, including these roadside, traffic counts, etc. All this kind of dialogue that had taken place with the different stakeholders before putting in place, these action plans. And I guess it's a question to both our speakers, Adam and Jean-François, which is how do we know that there is a dearth of quality data in many African cities, and how do we overcome this nonetheless in order to make sure that the different tools that would be presented can be deployed effectively in African cities? Adam, maybe you want to say a few words.
I will let Adam answer that one. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's a very good question, and there's multiple ways to collect data. I guess the future way of collecting data is that, of course, people are starting to do it with like cell phone data, and TomTom and companies like that are using big data, but that in your regions, that may not be the case. So a lot of this goes back to what we were doing, with machine counters and actually going out into the field and collecting the data either by hand or using handheld counters and things like this. But this is exactly part of the course that we're getting into with the impact assessment of coming up with a data collection plan. It's more economical to have a really nice, well thought out plan, and understanding those levels of CIAs that I talked about, where you can collect the right amount of data that you need for your study, and really make sure you're getting it right the first time, because nothing's more frustrating than starting your study and then you realize you don't have enough data and you have to merge existing data sets together, and it's very painful to do that. And a lot of times that leads to further problems, and it snowballs to the quality of your analysis. Maybe it doesn't end up being as well as you thought. And you get to the end and the approving agency looks at it and doesn't believe it or doesn't like it, and you almost have to start over again. So that's why this data collection plan is very important, and you have to sit down and consider, what are my data sources? Are they trusted? Do I need to go out and collect data? How can I do that safely, and how can I do that economically? And I would say also one tip is really don't penny pinch, or really don't discount like how much data you collect, because you could say, well, I don't need this count, like 400 euros or whatever by not collecting this count. But you may be spending 5,000 euros down the line because you didn't collect that count, because you have to redo things and manually add data sets together. So it does take a lot of thought. So there's no easy answer to this.
Well said, Adam, and I'm sure this is a topic you will explore again in the context of perhaps the first webinar. I want to address then the question of participating cities. This is a program which has been launched, as I said, in partnership with the African Development Bank. It's there's very much an open invitation for cities throughout Africa to participate in this event. Some of you perhaps are not with a city government, but are perhaps involved in a particular African city, and so we encourage you to help spread the word and ensure that your counterparts in the municipalities and local governments are able to fully benefit and leverage this opportunity. We have a nice count of cities already. Again, thank you very much for those who've completed the chat with your city of origin. So the idea is for to enroll these cities in this program, for them to participate in the different webinars, resulting in an action plan. We'll provide a template for this, and these municipal representatives and other stakeholders will also be then convened on the occasion of our Africa Regional Congress in Accra. And there will be opportunities again for this time face-to-face training, the application of the theoretical learnings, and we saw how this in the case of the for traffic impact assessments, that there would be the possibility to kind of simulate developments, using tools, etc. So a very exciting program of work, which I hope many of you will have an opportunity to fully benefit from. I see we've exceeded the initial time set aside for this webinar. So I'll just look around for perhaps a final question, if there are any, or final thoughts, and if not, perhaps turn to our colleagues from the African Development Bank for any closing thoughts.
Okay.
Neji, in particular, if you have any concluding
okay,
remarks.
No problem. No, I don't have a question, but just complimentary something for our friends from TV. Probably to insist on the two more things that you didn't see in your presentation. The first one is that not only any development or land use changes, commercial, residential, etc., that need to be studied under the TIA guidelines. Probably we have a problem in our countries, in African countries, that things are done every time, and things are not changing too much. In America and Europe, we need to make at each, let's say, step you do, traffic impact assessment study, etc., and to see how to see this, etc. In construction areas in the center of the city, and there is nothing on impact on the surrounding streets, etc. So we insist on this. I probably invite some agencies from Abidjan and other cities, Kigali, and all different cities, to let them know that it's not a question of design and go to construct later. It's also a question of detour on deviation of things, and it's not done like this. It's studied, and we have to see where to put this traffic, where is going, and what is the impact of closing an intersection or a part of the road. So it's done in a way of traffic impact assessment. Second thing is the different people that will benefit from this training, I think, they don't know that the existence of this kind of things. So how to disseminate this to the institution, high institution, Ministry of Transportation, etc., to let them know that working on urban areas is not like in the rural areas when you have nothing and you are going to make a road or a bridge or anything. No, it's not like that. You are going to impact all the surrounding people, and all the city will be impacted by one point in probably around 2-3 kilometers, and all people, they have to plan their trips every day, working, schools, etc. And it must be done in a way that the impact must be minimized to all the users. Thank you very much.
Yep, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yep.
Neji, for those thoughts. Adam, I don't know if you want to come in with a brief response to that, but I think Neji, you've effectively highlighted the fact that there's not enough kind of knowledge, not enough awareness, these different tools that exist. What both tracks seek to present are not futuristic solutions, perhaps like the colorful futuristic, looking drawing of a or visualization of an African city I showed earlier. But these are tools that are kind of widely used around the world, and perhaps insufficiently applied, at least in some parts of Africa. And this is this kind of knowledge gap that we're trying to address with this program. But you've absolutely correctly highlighted that we need to focus on the realities in the field and on applied practices. And again, this will be our guiding thought throughout this program. So we hope this has been an informative program for everyone. There's been a little bit of chats going on there, so thank you very much for this this interaction. We will be sharing not just the proceedings and the recordings, but also we will be making a reference to various manuals, including the traffic impact assessment guidelines produced by the AFDB and SSATP. I believe there were, oh yes, of course, the TANGA action plan as well, which I think is a very helpful template for a lot of folks to use. And we will be convening you to our first webinar, part one of the traffic impact assessments, which will be presented by Adam Lynch and his colleagues from PTV, and that will take place next week. We will provide all the details in the follow-up email. So I'd like to thank on our behalf and on behalf of the African Development Bank and our presenters, participants in today's call. Again, we hope you found this informative, and we hope we have encouraged you not just to join the program, but talk about it to colleagues around you, and in particular in the cities where you operate. So with this, thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful and safe rest of the day.
Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon.